Good afternoon, St. George. This is Michael Harding.
And this is Christina Harding.
For On the Arts here in St. George.
There we go.
And, of course, the purpose of On the Arts is to expose those little secrets that we have out there, these artistic secrets that we don't want to have as secrets anymore. There's so much happening here in southern Utah artistically that this is an opportunity not only to plug some of the opportunities you have to go and observe art, but also to hopefully let you know that there are opportunities for you to go participate in art. Now, we have a very special guest in the studio today. Please say hello to Chase McPhee.
Woo, Chase!
Chase, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, something about Chase. We've had actors on here. We've had curators of museums. We've had musicians of all sorts. We have a specific type of performing that's going to be represented today, and that's stand-up comedy. Now, I have to tell you, I used to think that was just standing up on stage and telling jokes, and there certainly are a lot of people who still think that.
Yeah.
Now, I remember back in the 1980s is when I started to be very, very aware of stand-up comedians and such. Of course, everybody would watch Johnny Carson or the great late-night hosts, David Letterman, and not only would they do their monologues at the beginning of the show, which would be certainly a form of stand-up, but they would also have these people who came on to be funny. And I used to think, oh, it's so great. They just go on there and they tell jokes. But as I continued to watch throughout the 1980s, I started to notice that these were some of the best actors I had ever seen. Because it wasn't just telling jokes. They were creating characters. They were creating these personas that they used to tell these jokes. And, of course, we had back then, there were some of the shock jocks. We were talking earlier about Howard Stern, who was, of course, a radio host. But you also had comedians like Andrew Dice Clay, who was extremely, extremely controversial in his attitudes towards gender, his attitudes towards basically race and things of that sort. He really came across as a pig. And I'll tell you, a lot of people really did not like his humor for that. And I remember watching an interview with him, and I was blown away because I was ready to hate him when I was watching the interview. And I was surprised to find out that he was not, when it was just talking to him, the character that he presented on stage. The character that he presented on stage certainly was extremely controversial, was extremely offensive. But that was who he played. Now, I'm certainly not trying to justify offensive material or things of that sort, but I was struck by how much of a performer a stand-up comedian truly is when they create these personas and such. So I'm very much looking forward to learning about the process and the art of stand-up, as well as getting to know you, Chase.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, this is exciting for me.
Gotcha. Tell me, Chase, how long have you been doing stand-up?
First time on stage was in 2013 in June, and it went horribly. I mean, people asked if it was crickets, and it's like, I wish, because then there would have been some noise at all. And then I didn't dare go back until April of 2014.
Where were you?
I was in Salt Lake, but the first time I did it was a club that doesn't exist anymore up in Salt Lake. It was called Lumpy South.
Lumpy South.
Yeah.
Sounds delightful.
Doesn't it? What could go wrong there?
Yeah.
And, it went south really quick. Yeah. And then the next time
What a lumpy performance that was.
Exactly. Well, lumpy includes there would be some up parts. It was all down. And so next time was April of 2014. I went by myself without telling anyone I was going to Wise Guys. They have an open mic every Wednesday night up there. Yeah.
All right.
And that time it went really well, and that kind of set the hook.
What was the difference in that year span? What happened?
When I did it the first time, it was 2 weeks after I had went to see a pretty mainstream comedian in Salt Lake. And the first time I went, I wrote jokes that I could hear him doing that weren't necessarily true from me. And so I was trying to write material that I could hear him saying. And so I went, and it just went awful. The next time, I hadn't seen anyone in a year and a half at that point almost. And I went just with my own humor, my own jokes that I thought that had made people laugh that I had said, and thought, okay, I'm going to try this. And so it came from a more genuine place, I think.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to know more about you personally so that our audience can understand who you are, where you came from. And if you could just give us a little bit of your background of yourself.
So I grew up in Salt Lake, born and raised Olympus High School, so up on the East Bench area. Served an LDS mission right after high school in New York City.
New York.
Which covered Bronx and Harlem.
You really met some characters over there, I'll bet.
And when we think of Harlem, this is what you picture as me, I'm sure.
If you do want to check this out, go on to YouTube. We are broadcasting live, as well as on Facebook, Radio St. George. You can see what Chase McPhee looks like, and you can see he is definitely a product of Harlem.
just picture Napoleon Dynamite with some facial hair is basically.
Oh, perfect.
Let's see.
Wow.
Napoleon Dynamite at a full moon.
After my mission, though, I came down here and attended Dixie for a couple of years.
So you came to Dixie State.
I did, and studied communications where I was in the public speaking classes. And that kind of was the start of, because I'd go in there, write these speeches for public speaking, and my whole goal is to make the class laugh. And after that was like, I wonder if I could do that someday, is hop on stage. Because I grew up watching, my parents always let me stay up till the top 10 lists on David Letterman, and then it was time for bed. And so I grew up watching comedy, and so that's where it all started.
Gotcha. Well, you say that you wanted to make your classmates laugh and such. Is that where you started to build the set that you took for your very first performance?
No. From the time I stopped going to school here in 2010 to the time I went on stage, it was 3 years. What happened over the years is I had moved back to Salt Lake and was closer to my family, and my family has its own diversity. I've got a stepmom that's from Chile, two stepbrothers Chilean, my brother-in-law's Vietnamese, 2 Vietnamese nephews, and so my jokes kind of came off of that, off of being the minority in my own family.
Right.
And just talking about that
right.
Would make people at work laugh. And I thought, okay, that's something I'm going to go. And so that was kind of the first big laugh I got, was just making jokes off of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm sorry, you were saying earlier that the material that you wrote for another comedian or with another comedian's voice didn't seem to work for you. Is everything that you do from your personal experience?
The stuff that seems to work the best is, there's times where I'll make a joke about just nothing about making a joke, and it can work, but one thing about being on stage is the audience can tell if you're nervous or if you're confident in what you're saying. And when it comes from personal experience, it's easier to be confident in what I'm talking about.
And honestly, are they all drunk at the time, or are they?
There's those times where that's been the case,
yeah.
Where, and when that's the case, they feel like they have to chime in on what you say. Or if you're asking a generic question, you ever hear this? And you'll hear some lady in the back trip over her glass. Yes. It's like,
well, that
thank you.
There was that joke, yeah.
Well, that begs the question, how do you handle hecklers? And do you have any particular stories about that?
I've been lucky. I haven't had anyone really shout out any heckles or anything. There's a time where I was telling a story and I used the term going to jail, and he corrected me and said purgatory. Every time I said jail, he'd say purgatory. I don't know what the difference is. And how many times have you been to jail if you have to defend it and call it purgatory? So, and after that, it's like a quick statement, and then I just move on as quick as possible so that they shut up and I can just move on.
You're not attacked.
No, and I don't feel like I have to attack them.
Yeah, yes.
Well, and a lot of people, they think that, of course, even telling jokes from your own experience, it's just about telling stories. I remember seeing an interview with Ron White, who I find very funny. You know, they call him Tater Salad, for Pete's sakes. And, of course, he did his tour with the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, and he was talking about how Jeff Foxworthy had heard him do a set and found him to be funny, but whereas everybody else was coming up to him saying, "Oh, you're hysterical. Oh, my gosh, I haven't laughed so hard." He was struck by Jeff Foxworthy because he came up and he said, "You have potential, kid." And then, started talking to him about how he could not only tell these funny stories, but also word them differently and end on different words and use something that I'm very, very fond of, rhetorical devices and rhetorical structure, in order to build a comedic timing. Let me ask you, how much of that craft goes into your sets, and how long does it take you to do that?
It depends on the situation. I've thought of, I have bits that took me 3 or 4 months to figure out exactly how I wanted to word them, and before I'd even try them on stage, but at the same time, I've gone on with funny stories that just didn't go well. There's a comedian in Salt Lake named Steve Solberg, and he's really popular in the Salt Lake area, and he's making quite a name for himself. He gave me some advice, and he said, you can tell a funny story, but what makes it a bit is you need punchlines. You need those funny one-sentence punchlines that make the situation even more funny, and that's kind of the craft is. I can start telling a story, and you can kind of get the audience thinking what I'm thinking, and then those 1 or 2 or 3 word sentences, that's where the punch comes in.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm amazed by rhythm and how that works. I was introduced to the videos of Eddie Izzard. Let's see, and that was, oh my gosh, that was back in 2004.
Just his name makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. What a great name. And I didn't know anything about him. When I was doing a show at Virginia Shakespeare Festival, and I was there, and I was older than a lot of the college-age interns that were there. And, they said, hey, there's this really funny guy named Eddie Izzard. And they invited me over to watch, and I didn't know anything, and I think it was Dressed to Kill that we saw, and he comes out in this big book, and here's this English-speaking transvestite coming down the stage at us, and I couldn't understand a word he said. Yeah. Not a word, because his accent was so thick, and he spoke so quickly. But I will tell you, what I noticed was I could not pick myself up off the floor from laughing so hard, even though I couldn't understand it, and I was struck by his rhythm.
Yeah.
The way he spoke just made you want to laugh. And then I actually listened to what he was saying, and I was blown away.
Yeah.
How much rhythm work do you do?
I think, that's the thing, is everyone's got to find their own rhythm and what works for them. If I go up and trying to be Eddie Izzard's rhythm, it's not going to go well. Just like my first time on stage, I was trying to be Daniel Tosh's rhythm. It doesn't work. And so you got to kind of find a way to be who you are with your friends. That's who you've got to be on stage. Because if you're making your friends laugh, it's because it's a natural rhythm that you have. So, if I'm on stage, I want to be talking to you almost the same way I'm talking now, but throwing punchlines in.
Well, I was surprised, talking with friends of mine and telling them who I was going to have on today for the show. They were surprised there's a stand-up comedians in St. George. Yeah. Is this fairly new for this area?
It is, and it's so. When I moved down here in August of 2016, I moved back down here, and that's when I met my wife. We just got married in December. But,
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. That's a whole list of new material. But there wasn't a comedy community down here. But the owner of Wise Guys was looking at potentially putting a club down here, and so he told me to keep my eye out and see how the community would respond to open mics. And I didn't put too much work into it. And then I met George Scott, who hosts the George Fest every Friday, first Friday of the month. Yeah. He puts on musical open mics a couple times a month at Perks, and it used to be at Even Stevens. And then I went and did a comedy set at one of the music open mics, and another guy went up and did it. And then he started in February hosting 2 open mics a month throughout St. George. And so just since February, it's kind of started to pick up, and the crowds have kind of started to get bigger, and there's more people coming out to participate. And all of a sudden now we've got a handful of comedians that live here and just never knew about anything. And there's a guy named Shane Williams and his son Cole, hilarious.
Oh, really?
Shane and I just we just did an opening set on Saturday night for a comedian named Rio Hillman, who came through town.
It was at the Office Lounge?
Yeah.
Yes.
There in the Hilton.
Hilton, yeah.
And Cole, his son Cole would have done it, but he's not 21 yet. And they're very strict. So, but Shane, local guy, hilarious. There's quite a few that are just scattered throughout St. George that are coming out. And it's like this, you guys talked about the secrets of St. George. This is a secret that we're trying to release.
Get the word out.
Get the word out.
What are your audiences like? Is it mostly younger, college age, or are you?
It varies. There's been times where the audience looks like they came over from the rest home. And other times,
I hear there's a funny person down there.
They need it, yeah.
No, and other times it looks like the Babysitter's Club because there's little kids, and then anywhere in between. So
Get me away from these children.
Exactly. It's you see kind of the diverse audience St. George has to offer.
Interesting. And so, are you finding that? Do you have to do 2 sets? Do you have to do a family friendly and then later in the evening an adult, or do you guys just don't care? It's just caution to the wind.
It's kind of read the audience. We're asked on the flyers that we pass out for the open mics. We say keep it PG-13 because you never know what's going to be there. Not everyone has followed that rule.
True. Yeah.
I don't really have any really crude humor in my stuff, so it's not something I worry about. But there's been a few that show up and they will drop an F-bomb or something. You just go, there's a 6-year-old over there. Be careful.
Yeah.
We're in public restaurants. We're not in that environment.
And so where have all the places that you've performed? You said Even Stevens.
Even Stevens for a while, the Perks in Washington. Every now and then they'll let someone go at the Jazzies. They do open mics
Oh,
at Jazzies
yeah.
on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And if people show up and sign up, they'll let you on.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So anyone can go over there and just decide that they want to try their hand at stand-up.
And they'll give you 5 minutes if you want it, or 2 minutes, however long you want.
Wow.
So, and then at the Office Lounge, the manager over there, I'm forgetting her name, but she wants to start bringing comedy more in there based off the success that we had Saturday night.
Oh, great. And how big was the audience on
About
Saturday?
80 people is what
Wow.
they sold 80 tickets. And so assuming everyone who bought a ticket was in audience, that was a pretty full room.
That's fantastic. How much were the tickets at these events?
$10 a piece.
So that's
and
not
then,
bad.
And then everything else that I've done here has been free. It's public. It's come on in, sit down, enjoy a drink, and
Yeah,
have
laid
some
back and have
laughs.
some laughs, which we all need.
Yeah.
I'm just really struck by the fact that most of the comedians I know. Well, okay, I'm going to step back for
Uh-oh,
a second.
great.
Because
out, Chase.
As people know, I like to talk. I'm an actor. I like the sound of my own voice.
Really?
We all do.
Really?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there he goes. Okay.
But I'll tell you, as I speak into the microphone, something that always amazed me, being an actor, was that a lot of my circle, a lot of the people who I knew would expect me to be outgoing. They would expect me to be really loud and boisterous and things of that sort. And when it comes to, you can ask my wife on this. You really can.
Oh.
When it comes to public situations or in groups or what have you, I tend to be a little quieter. I tend to sit back and listen. And there were a lot of people who were surprised by that. They thought, well, you're an actor. You like getting out there. Well, that's my job. And yeah, I do like getting on stage. I do like speaking the words of a playwright and such. But when it comes to my own personality, I'm rather different than what I present on stage. I remember even seeing an interview with Eddie Izzard, who we mentioned earlier, and I think it was on The View or something like that, and they said, well, are you the life of the party whenever you go somewhere? And he says, no, as he says much more eloquently than I will right here and with a British accent, he says, no, I'm actually a rather quiet person. I like to listen. I like to observe.
I'm rather a quiet person.
Yeah,
talk like that.
Daphne Moon
No,
from
thank you.
Frasier.
I guess that was Daphne.
I don't know.
I was trying to do Eddie Izzard. I can't quite find my Eddie. All right. All right. Okay.
We've moved into Fat
Okay,
Bastard
so-
from the Austin Powers movie. But
Can we say that on the air? Okay.
we just
Yeah,
did.
We
I
just
hope
did.
it wasn't-
Okay.
Better you than me.
Yay!
But I'll tell you what I'm enjoying about this conversation, Chase, is we're not trying to be funny. We're not trying to do stand-up or what have you. You're just a regular guy. And all this. Do you ever try out your material on, say, you do have a stepson now and you've got a wife? Do you ever go home and do those
yes. How does
dad
that go?
jokes?
If I so this is what I tell Gavin, my stepson. If there was 200 Gavins in a room, I'd have a career.
That's
because he'll laugh at
Aw.
everything. Kristen probably gets sick of me saying, "Hey, I had this idea," but she's great. She's always, "Oh, let's hear it," and so she's extremely supportive. I try and not do it around people who will be biased, and so if I'm just talking to a group of guys at work or whoever, I'll slip it into casual conversation without them knowing it or without telling them, hey, this is a joke idea I have. And if I can slip it in a conversation and it can get them laughing, that gives me a little bit more direction of how I want to do it.
So they're basically your mice. You're practicing. You're on them, and they'd have no idea.
You guys are my mice right now,
That's
baby. For all I know, if
perfect,
something
yeah.
pops up here, I might have to go write it down.
To write it down, yeah.
Mr. McPhee, you are very funny. I'll tell you, my bubble was burst a few years ago, actually. Jim Gaffigan is one of my absolute favorite stand-up comedians.
Yeah,
And
I quote
please
him all the
forgive
time.
my ignorance. I don't have a real deep set of stand-up comedians. I know the basics.
Yeah.
But with Jim Gaffigan, I was watching some interviews with him that he was doing with, I don't know, whoever the hosts were, Conan O'Brien and what have you of the time. And there was a concert of his that had come out and was being broadcast on Netflix, and I loved his material. Well, I went back and I looked at these interviews that came out about a year before the Netflix special, and I was really disappointed because he was trying out his material in what I thought was regular conversation.
Yeah.
And I believe it was the Southern attitude after eating biscuits and gravy, and that's why they're so slow down there. And I found it so funny in the concert, and then he had just worked it into a conversation, and I was actually kind of I was kind of insulted that I was being manipulated as such by my favorite comedian. But it just really brought out the craft that needs to go into this.
Yeah, and there's a subtlety to it, and if people know you're doing it, it can be insulting. Sometimes it happens without you even knowing it. There's a joke I worked into my set Saturday night that I had never said on stage that came in a conversation between me and my wife and a mutual friend of ours at the nutrition club she works at, where we were just kind of joking back and forth about my wife being 6 years older than I am.
Uh-huh.
And the comment was made that when she graduated high school, I was at recess. And that, I remember watching high school girls drive by when I was at recess and being like, oh, someday.
Fantasies.
And then little did I know my wife was driving by the elementary school going, oh, someday.
Someday.
But I mean, that's the conversation we had at the club. And I went home that day and went, I'm going to write that down. And then I threw it out on my set on Saturday night and it worked terrifically.
And it was great. And they received
so it's not always a conscious thing that we're trying to work out the material, but my mind's just always looking for the next punchline. And so if it happens to pop up, I'm sorry, you were an experiment.
That's great. Aren't we all,
happy
though?
to be an experiment. Well, we actually have here, Chase, some YouTube video, which, of course, is very, very useful over the radio. We can, of course, broadcast the sound.
Yeah.
But this is, you can see the image that we have up here. When was this particular performance?
That night was in June of 2015, where I had a set a few months before where I had bombed and I just didn't want to go back anymore.
Oh.
And I went to see one of my favorite comedians perform, Christopher Titus, and he's not necessarily the funniest, but as far as handling a room, having the best stage presence.
Oh, yeah.
And so after I went and saw him, I thought, okay, I'm gonna give this another go. And so that was one of the first times I actually ever invited anyone to come see. If I was going to go do this and it was going to go terrible, didn't want it to be in front of people I know. I want it to be in front of 60 strangers that I'll never see again.
So you felt more comfortable being in front of a group of strangers than people that you knew with your material?
Still do.
Really?
I'd rather tell jokes to 80 strangers than 4 of my best friends.
That's interesting.
So I invited some of my friends, and one of my friends actually took that picture while I was up on stage, and that was only a 90-second set that I had that night, and you can see my smile on my face. It was going terrific.
You were like...
I'm actually kind of stunned. You say it was a 90-second set. This clip is 4 minutes and 9 seconds long. Can you explain this to me?
So this clip is 4 minutes of a different set, the audio clip, and it's just filled with pictures that were taken over a span of 2.5 years.
Oh, okay, got it.
So,
all right. Well, if it's all right with you, Chase, I'd love to play a little bit for our audience, and they can get a sense of who the heck you are.
Oh dear.
Here we go.
That catchline or tagline that the sponsor had kind of reminds me of my marriage, that I was a people putting people in people for a while. Had 5 boys, but anyway. Next up, we've got Chase. Here he is. Thank you. Good job at Jerry Allen. Thank you very much for coming out to the comedy show. It's nice of you to take a break from Netflix. That's good news. I love Netflix. I was watching Netflix a while back. I was going to watch Orange is the New Black, but I was a little bit mistaken as to what that show was about. I thought it was a documentary series about when Trump won to replace Obama. There we go. I got a text a little while back that wasn't supposed to go to me. That ever happened to you? That's the best, because that is someone's mistake that is now permanent. You have evidence of that forever. Especially if it's like one of your friends that tried to push this and you got it, that's the greatest. I got a text that says I want the spirits doing it in my sleep. I don't know what that means. But it was really awkward because it came from my dad. That's an awkward one, but most of the jokes I write come from a real place where I had some sort of awkward moment. Another hard thing for me in life. I had a great family. My mom looked like Clara Fawcett, and my older sister looked like Zoe Chanel. I look like Napoleon Dynamite. Now, it's awkward because that movie came out 1 week before my senior year of high school. I hadn't seen it yet, and instantly I became the most popular kid in school. People would come up to me and be like, "You look like Napoleon Dynamite," and I'd say, "No, gosh." I had never seen it. I had no idea what was going on. Another awkward thing for me my senior year of high school is my dad got remarried to a woman whose daughter was the captain of the drill team at West High School. Now, to put that in other words, I have a hot stepsister. When you have a hot stepsister, your entire life becomes a partner. Everyone you know in your life is going to make fun of you almost every day. Almost every day, someone will come up to me and say something stupid like, "Put her to the test, incest is best." I'd be like, "Thanks, Grandma." She didn't actually say that to me. My grandma was a wonderful woman. She fed us dinner every Sunday, and when we'd be eating dinner, my sisters would play a game.
Wow.
I tried to warn you about that last time.
And we've got the FAA coming in here,
Yeah.
or the FCC. Sorry about that.
This is my last right
That's fantastic.
The point of this, Jim,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the good stuff there. I was just thinking how important it is. I mean, we talk about this all the time about the arts. Any kind of artistic form is important for an outlet. But my word, what release you must have on stage to just get people to laugh.
Yeah.
And how you're on a roll when that audience is roaring.
It's one of the few things in life where you instantly know how you're doing. It's either
like
going
that.
horrible
Yeah.
or really well. There's really not a lot of middle ground there.
And that you're going to survive even if it does go horrible. It's
In the
a
moment,
learning curve.
you're not sure if you're going to survive.
The sweat starts coming and the
then you
heart
start-
pounding,
yeah,
and you wonder how we're going to live through this.
and you just know you're not going to sleep for 3 days. You're
Oh,
just going to
no.
hear silence. But
But what a great opportunity, I mean, to actually hear the audience when you do have them in the palm of your hand and to leave that stage knowing that went so well.
there's nothing like having that laughter and you know that they're going to hang on every word you say and you think, okay, I've got
I've
you.
got it. Have you had anybody
Hi, I'm Jack
recognize you
Black.
after
And I'm Kate Blanchett.
stand-up?
Fantastical events occur in the most
Maybe
unexpected
twice.
places.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I was in Salt Lake and it was after a show I'd done at Wise Guys, and I had just come up with this new joke and it went really well. The next night I was at the gym and someone said, "Were you at Wise Guys last night?" "Oh man, you were really funny." And he didn't recognize my name or anything. He just recognized me from a 3-4 minute set that I did the night before. So I mean,
That's great.
it's not really doing it to get recognition. It's
Right.
just
Just
I have a blast doing it.
and you're having a good time doing it.
It's a strange addiction, but I love it.
Do you ever think that there's people, that they're out there that are listening? Because we say this all the time, and that's the point of the show, is to say, if you've got a talent and you want to try it out, you can do this. And I know that you said you just tried out for Dixie's Got Talent, or you're trying out. What tell us about that?
Auditions aren't until November 17th, but registration was a couple weeks ago, and I got to know one of the winners of Dixie's Got Talent from 2 years ago, Bailey Carter, who's a fabulous singer, and he's just a terrific guy. He was talking to me a little bit about it. He came to see one of my shows, and so we started talking about it, and he said they'd never have comedians on there. Why don't you sign up? And so even the person who's in charge of it when we were signing up said, "Yeah, absolutely, we're excited to have you." And so
Finally, a comedian. Yeah.
The auditions are the same day my wife and I are flying out to Virginia. It's the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And so my audition's like at 8 a.m. in front of 5 people. So
Prime funny time.
exactly.
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
just see how well this goes. But
Yeah,
if I can make 4 people laugh, then
That's right. At
At
8 in the morning, they're going
Yeah.
to need that. So start them off on the right
I'm
foot.
going to bring them all a Red Bull and say, "You're going to need
You
these before I start."
Drink this, and then you'll be fine. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's wow. I was. Oh, you go ahead. You have a question?
Well, I was just going to ask, where do you want to go with this,
Yeah.
with comedy?
Good question.
So I've been asked that before. Right now, I just want it to grow in St. George. I want it to be a regular thing in St. George because the arts are awesome here. I mean, you see St. George Musical Theater, which you've been a part of, or Brigham's Playhouse, and you just got done with the show out at Kayenta. There's arts and stages here. I would love for comedy to be a part of that here on a regular basis. And ultimately, I would love to have like a a comedy festival for a weekend where some of the stages get opened up, like the Electric Theater or something, and say, we're going to bring in X amount of comedians from Salt Lake, Vegas, or Phoenix. And for, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, people can go see a show once, like an annual thing. That's honestly kind of what the goal is now, is just helping it grow in this community.
That's a great idea.
So,
yeah, I think it's very much in demand and it's growing, but
with the city growing, I think the demand will grow as well. I don't think we're quite there yet to have its own comedy club, but if it keeps building, I would love for that to happen.
If someone wants to come see you, where do they go? Where's next?
Next place I'll be.
Where are you going to be?
The Office Lounge is trying to put a few more things together within the next couple of months, but the second Friday of every month, I'll be at Perks in Washington at the open mic they do there. And that's really where I'll go try new jokes that I haven't said before, just joke ideas and get a feel for how they sound coming out of my mouth. And that's a pretty small venue, but it gets more intimate and it's fun because, people show up there, you get 25, 30 people in there. And it's a kind of close-up experience. And if people want to try it, it's perfect because there's no pressure.
You just jump up
and...
What time in the evening do they do these?
They started at 7, which is nice because Perks usually closes at 7, but on those nights, they'll stay open till 9. So it'll go from 7 to 9.
How fun.
It's a blast.
Yeah.
But I'd say that's actually really intriguing to just go and stand up there. I have to admit, I don't know that I'd be a stand-up comedian. I'd be more of a stand-up downer when it comes down to it. I'd say, I'm going to tell you a sad story. I wonder if anybody ever does that.
What?
Being a stand-up soberer or something.
I've seen some comedians do that.
I've seen some comedians not intend to do that.
Well, there's the whole stigma of comedy comes from pain, and everyone has this dark
Chase,
past.
what is that about?
If we want to dig into it, let's do it.
Oh, no, Chase, we got time.
But I've seen people who they'll come up and want to tell you their pain. They just forget to make it funny, and then it can turn a whole room awkward.
Oh.
And it's
no.
It's you're in the audience, and you're just going, oh, dude, get off the stage, please, for your own sake. This isn't good, so...
Yeah.
Well, I've heard rumors of, again, I don't have any experience with stand-up, but I've heard rumors that there's that light behind the audience or something that the owner can say, when you see that light, it's time for you to leave the stage. Is that true?
Yeah, it depends. So Wise Guys, they'll give you a flash when it's for your last joke, they'll flash like a flashlight at you. And before I moved down here, they installed like a little clock because if it's open mic up there, you get 35 comedians that they've got to fit in 3 hours. So you're up there for 3 minutes and there's a clock that will tick down. But if you're doing well, they'll add more time to that clock.
Got
and
it.
if it's not going so well, he'll give you a light and say, hey, probably wrap it up.
Oh, so it's great when he says you've got more time. You're like, or is that like petrifying?
It depends because you might not have more.
Yeah.
And is that when you just say, you've been a great audience?
As soon as I heard the biggest laugh that I didn't think I was getting anything better, good night. Because there's been times where I've tried to go an extra mile and I go from howl laughter to just dead, just killed a room in 2 words. I went, okay.
No.
Good night.
No. You want to end on a good note. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well,
Gotcha. Well, Chase, thank you very much for being with us today.
Appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, you're great.
So.
You're great. And when is the Office Lounge going to do another show?
There's no official date yet.
All right.
She was talking to me Saturday night, and she's been talking to Shane Williams again, and she's got a couple names from Salt Lake she's going to try and bring in, so hopefully within the next 2 months.
Oh, great. And where do people go to find information on this?
Is there a website?
So the Office Lounge is inside the Hilton.
Okay.
And so if they go to and the Office Lounge has its own Facebook page. I ironically don't have a Facebook page. However, right?
Who are you?
I used to, and then it became too much of an addiction, and now I'm proud to say I'm 7 years Facebook sober.
Oh.
And so
I can only aspire.
But Shane Williams he's going to put together a Facebook page for comedy community in St. George, and that once that's up, we'll present that out. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. People can find that there, but once that Facebook page is up, it'll be much more advertised.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Well, Chase, thank you so much. And
Thank
what we're
you.
going to do now, just so everybody knows, we're going to have a little bit of an interlude by one of my absolute favorite stand-up comedians, and that is Jim Gaffigan. And this is while we do a little switch over here in the studio. For the last part of our show, we are going to be talking about a different kind of theater. I was talking about how...
stand-up comedy, yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
And how stand-up comedy is different from the musical theater or even the straight theater that you see. We're going to talk about a very different kind of theater with a very different kind of message. But until we come back, here
Thank you,
is...
Chase.
Thank you guys.
Thank you,
This was
Chase.
awesome.
Thank you,
I
Chase.
reference
Here is
McDonald's
Jim
a lot.
Gaffigan. And as we are waiting for our next guest to come here to the studio.
Let's hope she makes it in time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Christine and I, we are thoroughly enjoying Jim Gaffigan
We
here.
love Jim Gaffigan, yes.
And there's also, what are some of the others that you enjoy listening to?
Robin Williams.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
a huge
yes.
Robin Williams fan, yes.
He's ever since, I remember he was on Mork and Mindy.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that show. But then I saw him, he did a performance at the Metropolitan Opera.
Yeah.
At the Met. I watched that pretty much every afternoon from the time when I was 17 all the way till about 24.
Mm-hmm.
I could do the entire show. I will not, but
no,
I could
please
do
don't.
the entire
Yeah, that's
show.
all right. Yeah, yeah.
We got that. And of course, we mentioned Eddie Izzard,
Yeah.
another one. And in Las Vegas, I had the pleasure of meeting Rita Rudner. I don't know if people...
I don't know Rita.
Oh, my goodness. She was hysterical.
Yeah.
She did all the television rounds and things of that sort. And I have to say, it was really fun to get to know Chase in that he's such a sobering individual. And yet, when you see him on stage, he's hysterical.
Funny. It just proves that a person's, they can be totally different than what they are on stage. They can be a completely different person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And great stand-up comedy. I cannot wait to see him live again.
Well, and I certainly do hope that the stand-up culture, if you will, does take off here. I mean, we've got plenty of theater. We do have a lot of theater. We've got a lot of music. How wonderful to have a place where people can just go and
relax
laugh.
for an evening and laugh for a whole entire evening. Yes, that is very important.
Well, and I can't emphasize enough that we have the open mic opportunities as well.
Yeah. Anyone can join. Mm-hmm.
I'm actually really intrigued to do that. I know that go listen to that. There is an event at Kayenta that I don't know how well publicized it is right now, but it's called Coyote Tales.
Yes.
And it's just all about people coming if they have
Tell
stories.
Mm-hmm.
And what a wonderful opportunity to share.
They fill their whole theater there with guest artists and patrons who love to go out there and hear. And what a beautiful setting, out there. So.
Well, and I do have to say, we are running out of time here.
Well, Michael, who was going to be our guest today that we wish she could made it on time. Something must have happened, but she was going to be talking about her show that is opening next week here at Dixie State University. Who was this guest?
This guest was Dr. Catherine Sisoyeva, actually. And she's put together a piece of theater, which is probably what she's working on right now, frankly.
Yes, she's probably...
It's made up of two pieces. One is called La Frontera, and the other is called Augustine. And there are two pieces because she's very interested in showing a different side of theater. A lot of people think when they come for a product that they're just going to have the curtain up, they see the show, and curtain down. These are two events that are going to be quite different. La Frontera is actually quite political when it comes down to it.
Political, what do you mean?
Political in that it deals with current events and it's created out of current events. And what she's done is she actually took a group of students down to the border between Tijuana and the California border. And they actually got a chance to experience what it was like on this side of the wall that's being constructed and on the other side of the wall that's being constructed. They were able to see different culture, how the Americans are looking at the wall, how the Mexicans are looking at the wall, and how the two groups can come together. They actually had an opportunity to do some theater rehearsals, some theater workshops with some of the Mexican theater practitioners, and vice versa, actually. And they also got to visit the detention centers, where there's been a lot of work in the news and a lot of reporting in the news about families being separated and things of that sort. They decided to go in firsthand and see what was going on. And from this experience, they've created a piece of theater, which is monologues that they've written about their experience, monologues about the experience of others that have been in there, scenes that they've written about this, sharing their experience through theater with audiences here in St. George. Now, they also have something that's called environmental theater, if you will, and it's, oh my gosh, we could get into the whole history of happenings and installation art, but the fact that we're building a wall, as Americans, we're building a wall along our border, they're actually building a wall in the lobby of the Eccles Fine Arts Center.
Eccles.
Just as...
Building a wall, actually, and it's part of the installation experience, where there's going to be a symbolic wall that will get the audience primed for the story that they're about to hear, or the stories, I should say, that they're about to hear and experience.
Now, as well, there's a piece called Augustine. We're taking a little bit of a departure from the political there, but this deals with aerials and physical presentation
This will be
of
part of
storytelling.
the whole experience.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it'll be in the Black Box Theater. And it's basically, you're not going to come and see a polished performance. What you're going to see is a rehearsal process in progress. You're going to see experimentation with the aerials, with the silks hung from the ceiling, and with the performers experimenting with physicality and storytelling as such. So this is, a lot of people when they come see this, and this is going to be not this coming Thursday, but a week
So
from
next
this coming
weekend.
Thursday. Yeah, Thursday, Friday,
How much
and
are the
Saturday.
tickets for this?
The tickets for this, it's if you have a Dixie State ID, then you have $1 to get in. You can't really beat that.
Fantastic, yeah.
And I believe it's $10 for the public. And that's for Augustine, if you will. But for
Augustine.
the installation, you just walk in the lobby
And
and you get to see. Yeah.
are they performing that before Augustine, or is that?
I believe they're going to be switched back and forth. So
Is
you
there
come
someone
in,
there to guide you? I assume that someone
Yes.
will be helping you along, because I wouldn't know where to go. I'd be a little confused. So.
Absolutely. You
Wow.
just come to the Eccles Fine Arts lobby at 7:15 is when I'd say get there. And that's not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday through Saturday. And you're in for an experience. It's going to be actually
What a
quite
great
fun.
experience for students too, to go through, to be able to tell their stories, you know,
Absolutely.
and to share something like that with the public. I think that's beautiful that Dixie State University is doing something like that. So
Absolutely.
original.
It's different than what a lot of people are used to. It's not necessarily well, it is original work, but this kind of theater is very, very
Yeah.
common throughout the
Yeah.
country. This is a wonderful introduction to St. George.
Yeah.
Now, as we are running out of time here,
Oh,
we do have a
dear.
list of
Yes,
things for
well,
people to
we've
do.
got a lot of neat things coming up. And Catherine, we love you, and we're sad that you weren't able to make it today, but I'm sure she's packed and busy today. So hopefully we can get her on the show at a later date. But this Friday, the St. George Town Square Dixie State University Orchestra is giving a free concert at 7:30 p.m. And they say to bring your blankets and chairs, and they're calling it a concert under the stars. They will be having singers there, and it's free. And you can just go sit on a blanket and listen to a beautiful orchestra play. What a great thing to
Under
do
the
this Friday.
stars.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
And then this Friday, don't forget about, we have South Pacific at Brigham's at 7 o'clock, Young Frankenstein at the Electric Theater at 7:30. Utah Shakespeare Festival is doing Liar, Othello, and The Foreigner. And also this weekend is the Utah Shakespeare Festival competition, which leads us to why we will not have a show this Thursday, because...
We are going to be judging. We're very judgmental artists.
Well,
That's
Michael's
nowadays.
judging. Yes, the Utah Shakespeare. They hold a competition. All the high schools come down to Cedar City and compete
And
and
they
perform
present
scenes,
monologues,
Yeah.
duologues, triologues,
Yeah.
and also some very, very fine interpretation.
Yeah.
That's something that I've been very impressed with Utah is the high school teachers.
Our teachers are amazing. Yeah.
They're pretty incredible. And that goes from all the way up to Salt Lake, all the way down here to southern
Yes.
Utah. You're
Yeah.
going to see some pretty amazing work. As well, Richard III opens at Southern Utah University.
Yes.
A tremendous
The
interpretation of that.
students will be performing that. And we also need to mention before we go off the air who's going to be on Tuesday. We have Gerald Gibbs. He's from the Celebrity Concert Series. He's the Director of Arts Programming at Dixie State University. So he'll be talking to us with Ginger Nelson, and that's going to tell us all about what's coming up at the Cox Auditorium. So we're excited for our guest on Tuesday. It's going to be a great show.
Absolutely. And please know that not only can you find out about things that are going on in the arts and people in the arts here on this show, but keep your ears to the ground in the newspapers, on Facebook.
And if you want to be a part of this show, we are booked clear until December, but we will be opening some slots in December. Please message us on our Facebook page, On the Arts with Michael and Christina Harding, and we'll be glad to get you on and talk about your event. We're excited to do this. Like we are so laid back and fun to interview with, and we just want to get everybody's secrets out.
And we had all the secrets out. That sounds so intimidating. But I will tell you, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being listeners. Again, you can check us out, the live video feed, and it will be archived as well on Radio St. George. And we look forward to talking to you again, hopefully hearing from you. Until then, keep your focus on the arts.